Welcome to From Broken to Build, the Marriage Reset podcast series. Today, I'm your host, Alpha Mshihiri, and it is such a pleasure. And I want to take you through a series of conversation that we're going to be having. And this is about the inner awakening from wishing to being. A lot of individuals, single, also even those married, we always wish, we always want to be, we always want to experience. But most of us have never had an opportunity to experience that which we want to be, that which we want to experience. Why is that so? Why more people are struggling to experience that which they want, they desire so hard, but they find themselves in a cycle that they cannot get out of it. So in this episode, we're introducing fundamental idea that attracting love begins not with external pursuit, but with an internal shift. The reason why people are in this rat race of pursuing is because they're pursuing outwardly. They're pursuing a dream, a hope. And it's a common sense thing that is, if I want to get water, guess what? I will go for water and be able to drink it. If I want food, I will go and look for it in order to bring home or consume it wherever I will find it. But that is the cardinal sin where most people find themselves in this pursuit and never achieve any relationship relevance to that which is ideal to them. In this conversation, I'm reflecting on my own book, which is called The Exodus Within. It is a book that mirror or borrowed from the story that is very familiar to most people who have read or attended some form of church at some point in their lives. The story of the children of Israel while they were in bondage in Egypt. And that's where the premises of my book, The Exodus Within, where I perceive the concept of Egypt as a place of limitation, a place where we find ourselves in bondage. You are the very person described in that story. And for that, I would encourage you to get a copy of my book so that you can explore this amazing phenomena, idea that highlight the importance of Egypt in your life. And how do you come out of that place called Egypt, a place where you are not comfortable with your circumstances, to a place where you will find peace, relevance, as most of you that are listening to this podcast today. So welcome into this amazing conversation, and I'm so excited that as I'm going to lay down, but I want to do so by using a client of mine, and her name is Sarah. So whether you are in this journey for pursuit a relationship or you are in a troubled one, you are the Sarah of this conversation today. And I want you to pay attention to what we're talking about, Sarah. What Sarah had to do in order to break through. How she found herself in her own Egypt. This journey of Sarah started years back. She was very beautiful. And I say she was because that's how she saw herself. She reflected on her early days in high school as a cheerleader, amazing. And she was pursued by she cheered for both football and basketball school team. And eventually she became the leader cheerleader. Imagine you're a cheerleader and you are the leader of the team. She became so popular and famous. Both basketballers and footballers were pursuing her in each and every corner. She found herself at the center of the attention, and she had to choose whom she will periodically give the attention to. And she enjoyed the attention she received for years until she graduated. She went to college and she was hoping to ride the same theme And when she got to college, the reality was slightly different. First, she didn't make up the cheerleading team. And that was okay because she was getting tired with the concept of the cheerleading and everything else, and she was ready to settle and focus on her education. And as she was there, she attended to different programs. She was in some a society that she was part of, and there were several events that were taking place. And Sarah participated in both of them. But in doing so, she was hoping she will find a meaningful connection. But instead, she always found just a fling, the overnight thing that didn't last beyond that night. For most of the relationships that followed, it will be just an overnight thing. The next morning, it's like nothing happened. And for a moment, she was okay with it. She figured something will materialize and go beyond just an overnight. And time went by, and she found out she was more on the overnighter than in a longer time relationship. And Sarah started getting frustrated from there. And she went through that process and eventually came a point she said, I can't keep doing this overnight. Because how many overnight can I have before I become the talk of the school? So she took a pause, she did an assessment, and she took a break for a period of time. And she played hard to get, even those overnighters she skipped and went by. But things never got better. And at some point, she found a decent person, a person that she had to settle with. It wasn't that which she was hoping to have, but under the circumstances, it was better than the best she had been experiencing the overnights. So Sarah went into this relationship and hoped that it will work out. Eventually, she will learn to love this gentleman. But the relationship went on for a year that it was strenuous. Simple things as just casual conversation, holding hands, kissing, laughing became so hard to come by because Sarah was not feeling comfortable in the company of the person before her. She forced herself. She tried to make herself laugh, to love him, to cuddle with him. But all of those became effort work. It was not natural. And eventually, after a year, Sarah couldn't take it anymore and broke the news to the gentleman, who Sarah claimed to be was very nice to him. But that experience kind of create a sour taste on Sarah. It was for the first time she found herself in a situation that she started questioning who she is. She started doubting herself. And from there onwards, she kept meeting people who are liking or interested in her were not consistent with her interest. She tried to date several times, and she tried dating apps, and things she was experiencing were not very tasty to her. She forced herself here and there, but none of them produces the results. If you are Sarah, and this story is yours, hang on. So Sarah continued, regardless of the circumstances she experienced. And Sarah, along the way, she decided to make a different shift. She's like, you know what? Maybe she heard it somewhere and she bought into that conversation. Then she felt maybe God is punishing her for her behavior when she was in high school because she played guys. There were many who were interested in her, and she played them around like a football, like a ball itself. And eventually, so she decided to go to church. And from there, she participated in a college choir for church. And she did very well. And she started loving it because she said, it's time to find God. And she went through that process. And she was single for a while until she graduated. In a year, she went back home trying to figure herself what to do with what she had learned. As she was exploring different careers, eventually she decided to go back. She found one that she felt like it was her calling. But before that, in that 1 year, she did a lot of missionary. She participated in food movement. She participated in every movement she could in adding value in serving God. And in that case, of course, she found a temporary relief. But after a year, and when she went to a workforce, she started feeling empty. One day, they were in an event with her colleagues at school, at work, and something led to something else, and an overnight reappeared again. So she had one overnight after years of being away from those. And that overnight just became an overnight. The next day, actually, when she saw the gentleman at work, it was as if nothing happened. And she wondered, is that something wrong with me? Am I not giving? Am I not doing adequately to a point where somebody will want a second a second part to go for the next? You go to this meal and you find some amazing meal and you dish it and you want to go for the second. And I will just add a caveat in that story when I'm talking about the second. I remember when the first time me and my wife bought our first house. There's a gentleman who helped up. His name is Frank. He was an older gentleman. And he was very nice. He always calls us kiddos. So how kiddos? How are you doing, kiddos? And he was very, very nice, very, very attentive. And he's one of those gentlemen that when he talks to you, you want to come very close to you, to pay attention, to make sure that you know that he's listening to you. So he will come and like right in my space and my wife's space. But we kind of got to know, we got accustomed. We didn't have a problem with him. He was very nice and we understood his intention. And he was old, and so therefore we thought maybe he needed a little bit better hearing. But I remember when he helped us and we closed our first house. So, he's the guy who helped, and we had my wife loves to cook, so she went and cooked a beautiful dinner, and we invited Frank to come over. Frank apparently was a widower, so he came over, and I remember the first time he went into it's a food that he's not accustomed. He'd never seen this food with all the spices and everything else before. My wife, when she goes in, she goes in. She will bring all the spices in the world to create that flavor on that meal. And she did her best in that day, as always she does. And in this case, Frank got the plate. And the first time, it's like she took the spoon. Frank took two spoons and put on his big plate. When you look at it, it was a plate of emptiness and tiny little pieces. I mean, tiny little piles of food. And Frank added some vegetables, just one spoon or so. And I guess he was, well, you know what? I've never tasted this type of food, but I'm going to be nice enough to give it a taste. And took a dip, the second one, and he took a dip, the second spoon, and the plate, of course, was empty. And we saw Frank got up again, went into the table, and I mean, in the center, fill it up take an additional 3, 4 spoons, and he came. That night, Frank made over 10 trips back and forth to the pot that had main dish and all the other things that surrounding it. Meaning that Frank found it interesting, flavorful. And so therefore he wanted not only the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth. And that is the dilemma that Sarah found herself. She started questioning, isn't she worthy of the second and the third, and therefore more than that? So she started this journey, a prayerful journey. She prayed consistently. She fasted where she can. And she went before the pastor. She was prayed by the congregation or the members of the choir that she was singing every Sunday. Participate and practice with them twice a week. They prayed for her. She can find a man or an ideal man for her. But every man that she met, things didn't hold water. Of course, not each and every one of them turned to be an overnighter, but it wasn't long lasting. She would date, and before she knew it, in a period of 3 years, she had dated probably about 5 people. And she wondered, how many does she have to date in order to find that one? If you're Sarah, think about that. The value, the worthiness you feel, suddenly you're not feeling that person. And Sarah started questioning more and more of herself. This vibrant young girl who was a cheerleader and became a captain on her cheerleading team, suddenly the brightness disappeared. She withered. In fact, she says one day she was in a grocery store and she met one of her old schoolmates from high school. And the gentleman looked at her as if he's recognizing somebody from a distance. He knew who he was, very charming, looking amazing. And the guy eventually approached and said, excuse me, you look familiar, but I can't really connect where I've seen you. If I have offended you or crossed the line, please forgive me. And she was embarrassed actually to tell the gentleman who she was. Because then she realized that her light is gone, that a person whom they knew each other, whom she could remember, cannot even remember her. In that moment, Sarah responded and said, I don't remember where we have met, or even if we have met. So they went their different ways. And when Sarah returned home, she sat and she embarked in a 7-journey day to fast. But she made a commitment, if God will give her a break, she will go for 41 days. 7 days came and nothing happened. And Sarah decided a very simple thing. She might as well just go all the way to 40 days instead of 41 that she promised. She said, God, if you do so, I will go to 41. 40 days she fasted, not without eating at all. She lightly ate. And of course, she decided she's going to engage herself in exercise so she can start looking good. And she took some yoga classes. So she participated in yoga for those 40 days and fasted at the same time with full throttle of prayers. Time came, but nothing changed. And Sarah wondered, when are things going to get better? But it was good because in that moment of wondering, she met the Wonder Man. And actually, she liked the guy. They started dating. And the relationship was amazing. Sex, intimacy, and they would laugh and everything else. A year later, the guy disappeared. He just packed and left just like that. And Sarah found herself again in a place of desperation. Her age was not getting younger. She started wondering whether, even if, she had a chance to meet Mr. Right. And she went in through a depression for a period of time. And she tried everything she could to make things better, but nothing was giving up. Again, yes, she was in a dating scene, but things were not working as she had hoped. Of course, she had her own needs she needed to fulfill, so she fulfilled them the way she could, but yet still without Mr. Right at her outside. So Sarah eventually tried multiple. She started going to coaching programs. She paid here, she paid there, she participated here, she participated there. And some of them gave her some relief, but none of them was everlasting. She will find herself and feel good, and eventually she will fall back again. Things will not hold water. Relationship will come and go. She will be disappointed. And it was a constant battle that she was experiencing. But for almost 3 years, there was one man was common in her life. They will connect, they will fight, and he will disappear for a month. He comes back, they will connect again. So there was this constant theme, but it was not permanent. It was just kind of a little yo-yo, just going back. It goes down, up and down, up and down. It wasn't staying down, it wasn't staying up. But she wanted, or she was craving for familiarity. And this gentleman provided just that. And it went on for 3 years. After 3 years, the gentleman couldn't have it anymore. He, in fact, went and started dating Sarah's friend. And 6 months later, he proposed to Sarah's friend and they got married. In less than a year, Sarah's friend was pregnant. Sarah was devastated, but she was forced to show up her face, pretending that everything is good, but there was nothing good about everything. She convinced herself, as the scripture says, in all things gives thanks. She tried, but it hurt. So one day, Sarah came across my book. And when she was reading the book, I guess she decided to do more research. She came across the book, The Exodus Within. And she decided maybe it's time to look at this guy because she was fascinated about the concept of the book and the approach on how to address any situation a person finds. I call it a bandage, your Egypt bandage. And she reached out to me. We had what I call a clarity call where I'm hearing the story and I do an assessment on whether that particular person, based on what they're trying to achieve, we can be able to create a connection. And after having a conversation with Sarah, Sarah was quickly to take one of my program. And from the program, Sarah told me after the fact that she realized from the program that it wasn't the men who were a problem, neither was she as the problem. Sarah recognized that the problems is never ourselves. The problem is the patterns that we hold true in our mind. So Apostle Paul, in his letter to the Romans, he writes 12:2, do not conform to the pattern of this world. A very fascinating statement. Do not. He didn't say, I beg you, or try not to. He said, do not conform to the pattern of this world. Simply put, don't do it. And which is the pattern of this world? I've heard many people with radical ideas, but I'm going to share with you what that means. Today, if you are like Sarah, you are living in a world that is of a particular pattern as it pertains to marriage, as it pertains to relationship, dating. Sarah recognized that she was living in a world of relationship that was of a particular pattern, and that pattern was a little bit uncomfortable to her. Sarah made that recognition. And when she recognized that, she said, I am not going to allow this pattern to be part of my experience. Many people rebuke these things. In Jesus' name, I rebuke. And Sarah have done that countless time because she was told she was in bondage. She'd been prophesied all kind of things, and they have rebuked them and speak against them and do all kind of things that are ritualistic in church today. But none of those could give the relief Sarah was looking for. But after reading the book and partaking in the program, the first week Sarah realized that. She's like, oh my God, I am not the problem. There is a pattern in each and every one of us in here. And Sarah recognized that in her mind, she had formed a pattern. Early on in her days as a cheerleader and as a captain of a cheerleader, she had formed a pattern in her mind. And that pattern became her identity. And from there onwards, she had learned to express that identity on each and every man or each and every connection she made as it pertained to relationship. That's very fundamental. Today, you are relationship wars or challenges is not because a particular sex group is a problem. It's not because you are a damaged good. It's not because you are not worthy, not you are ugly. You have nothing to do with that. Because none is ugly, none is unworthy, none is incapable of being loved. The problem is in the pattern we have formed in our mind. As Sarah recognized that she had this pattern, the pattern that she saw relationship as something to play with. She engaged when she was in high school. She was playing and having fun, and there's nothing wrong with playing and having fun as long as you're just playing and having fun. But for Sarah, she had looked at relationship as something she can play with and toy around. It's not something she should keep. Because she was pulled in each and every direction. She was in high demand. So she didn't want to keep any relationship. She thought, I'm just going to have fun with it and not keeping it. But that thought, that pattern that she came into an agreement with became her identity. Every pattern you form, there are people, I have clients who says they form a pattern that because they were hurt at some point, especially female, they will say men are dogs. It's an interpretation, but an interpretation based on a particular pattern of experience. And because one have created a pattern, and their words, as they say, express an experience as it relates to that pattern. Men are dogs, dogs. That becomes a mental pattern. That is the pattern that Apostle Paul warns against. He says, do not conform to that pattern. That pattern forms your world as it relates to relationship. So the world Apostle Paul is referring to, it is not the world as a whole universe as we know it. Instead, it is a reference of a particular nature, one experience. And in the case of Sarah, the nature was relationship, and the experience she was having was not pleasant as it relates to relationship. She had an amazing career. She grew through ranks quickly in her place of employment. And she was a star that the company took great pride to have her company in there. In fact, within a 5-year period in her career, she became the director, took great responsibility, and she was earning handsomely. But as much as she was able to demonstrate great quality in her professional, she couldn't attract even a fly to stay with her. They will swing and just disappear, and just gone. So Sarah recognized that she had a pattern. And that pattern was expressed in each and every experience of relationship she had. Nothing was worth keeping. That's the pattern she was in. Nothing was worth keeping. So Sarah applied the 3I framework that I have. And it's a simple scientific as well as psychological and spiritual truth. But before I break it down, that framework, I want you to think about your situation. Whatever way you are in this journey of relationship, you have to ask yourself, why is that which you're experiencing has become an experience to you? Out of all people in this world, you are the person who's experiencing this particular experience. And the next question that follows, I want you to ask yourself, is this the first time you're experiencing it, or you have already experienced this before? Because Sarah recognized that every perpetual experience he had, no matter what color it bared, no matter what characteristic, no matter what scent or aroma it came with, the underlying nature of it was not worth to be kept. But Sarah did not see that only on this relationship. Sarah had observed that in her upbringing. When Sarah was young, her dad decided to walk away from the marriage that Sarah found joy to be a company of. And as a young girl at that age, Sarah made a conclusion that she was not worth to be kept. Because the person she loved a lot, her dad, she played with him many times. He took her for an ice cream. They sat and listened to some music together. And in fact, the dad had taken her to fishing several times. Suddenly, that person decided to move out. So Sarah took it personal. It wasn't about her mom. It was about the dad leaving her. and therefore she had made a conclusion on her own mind she was not worth to be kept. And because of that separation, you can imagine the mom took custody of Sarah and two of her siblings. And the mom had to work extra hours, was busy to be able to make sure there's a bread on the table. The dad helped here and there, but the separation, I think, kind of put a toll on the dad, and he didn't do take it so well. And therefore, his performance, his presence on the children's became very, very scarce. And as a result, Sarah learned to feel and think as if she was not worthy. So when she came into an age where she could date, even though she was vibrant, she was all these things, she played the same role that she didn't see. Her temporary engagement with this relationship in high school was a reflection of her fear of somebody will leave her. So it was best for her to leave the person before she's left because she didn't want to have a broken heart. So psychologically, she was protecting herself from hurt that she experienced at her early young age from her father. So, but I want you to think of this very, very important statement or observation. If you are in this journey of the relationship, and whether you have kids in the marriage, I mean, in this relationship, out of a relationship, but you have kids, I want you to think it very hard because your behavior have significant impact on those you have custody over. Those kids, those young souls. You might think they're not observing, you might think they're not paying attention. They are truly attentive. And those type of decisions have significant impact in their lives. Just as the impact you have experienced from that which you've observed during your upbringing. As for Sarah, she didn't know this until when she took the program and she's like, oh my God. So she applied the 3I framework. Sarah started by a concept called idealized, which means she sat down, heart, and expressed her feeling as she feel it based on what she was experiencing. It wasn't about who did it, how it was done. It was only about how she felt. Once she identified the feeling at heart, she took the next step. You not only just idealize it, but the next step in the idealization process is what Jesus said: when somebody slapped you on the right cheek, turn the other cheek as well. It is obvious he wasn't talking about people being slapped and just giving it to the other side, being passive. No, he's talking a very simple, some fundamental principle that psychology have recognized, science applauds. Jesus was telling us, if I slap you, the natural thing to do is to bring about this concept of fight or flight, meaning you either gonna react by being aggressive toward me, or you're gonna run away from the situation at heart. But Jesus said, don't do that which is obvious. Do the opposite. So once you identify the emotions, pain, what are you feeling? When you describe it, number one, you have identified the boogeyman. And then now you know the boogeyman, he says, do the opposite. What is the opposite of? And Sarah went through that process and identified the ideal feeling that she wants to have. Not the ideal man, not the ideal marriage, the ideal feeling as it relates to a marriage. That's the secret. And from there, Sarah went forward. And there's a process there. There's a way how you do that. And Sarah went to the next level. From there, Sarah decided to take another step, which is introduce or internalize. Which means in the story of Exodus, we're told God told Moses, I am that I am. The simple formula of making it personal, of introducing that ideal to yourself. And Sarah did just that. But the secret is not about many people who pray constantly. They pray about being in a particular relationship. They pray about a particular thing. Some have affirmed over and over, have visualizing and do all kind of things, but yet they were not in getting the results. And Sarah have done it all. She had a vision board, but none of that produces the results until she took what she learned from the book and that which she was learning from the lessons from the program, the course that she was taking, and connect the two. Because we're told Moses appeared before Pharaoh, not by himself. He said, I alone cannot speak. And God said, you must take Aaron with you. Feeling is the secret. Aaron is that feeling, the feeling of joy. So Sarah compiled all that and applied the introduction phase. And then she didn't stop there just because she started feeling good about herself. Because she have an information, she have introduced new information into herself. As Apostle Paul says, transformation comes only through the renewal of the mind. I do not care how many times you pray, how often you go to church, who is the biggest pastor in the world can be praying for you. They cannot bring the miracle home. Miracle happens when a renewal of the mind happens. Apostle Paul made it very clear. Jesus has preached about it, but Apostle Paul put a nail on it and said it is through the renewal. The mind have to be renewed. Science tells us, neuroscience, you have to introduce new information to neurons of opposite. And that is the process of what we call renewal. Because you have a particular set of information passing through a particular neuron in your brain. And when you introduce the opposite of those information, you are renewing the old with something different, something new. That is the magic behind it. And Sarah went about doing just that. And the results were profound. Yes, it was. But she didn't stop there. Sarah went on and introduced the third pillar of my signature framework, 3I framework. She iterated. In the scriptures, it is written, pray without ceasing. Be persistent. Like the story of a woman who wanted justice, kept going to the judge over and over and over and over. And the judge said, I don't do this justice thing. I don't care about people. But this woman is so persistent. I'm going to hear her case and give her the results she's looking for. So Sarah's persistence paid off. 6 months after taking the program, she had just dedicated her time. She wanted to just really soak into this concept because she fell in love with the idea. And in fact, she said for the first time, she found peace, total peace. She didn't desire to be in a relationship. It didn't matter anymore. She was more happier. And in fact, when she realized this is true, a new transformation, she went to a reunion. And the feedback she had in the reunion were amazing. Everybody was telling how she's glowing, how young she looked. And fun enough, the same gentleman who she had met at the store a few years ago, and he could not recognize her. The moment he saw her, he's like, oh my God, Sarah. He was excited to see her. And time went by. So Sarah felt, she could see that her feeling of feeling good was not just in vain. People were testifying to the fact. And in fact, she recognized a very simple scripture when Jesus said, when you pray, enter into the room, close the door, and that which you do in secret, my Father in heaven will testify it, will bring others to testify. And there Sarah was experiencing the testimony of the very thing that she did in secret, that which she idealized, introduce, and iterate. And 6 months later, they were in touch with that gentleman she met a few years ago. And he said, could he thought he knew her. He thought he knew her. And for the embarrassment, she said she doesn't recall either where they have met. But in this case, when they met at the at the reunion, he recognized her immediately and was so happy to see Sarah. And of course, they had exchanged numbers, like she did with a number of people. The gentleman stayed in touch with her over. He was living and working somewhere else, far from where Sarah was staying. But eventually one day Sarah got a call from him and he said, I'm in town. I'm looking for a place to stay. And that conversation struck a new relationship. It became a new touching point. Sarah was not expecting. In fact, Sarah helped the gentleman to find a place. And he found a place because he had a new job. So Sarah went with the guy several times as he was looking for a new home. It was just one of those casual conversations. Eventually, they found the house. He found the house, and a new relationship blossomed. And Sarah found herself in love with a gentleman who they went to school. They were not very close, but they knew each other to some extent. And that opened a new door. Today, Sarah is married. In fact, it didn't take long for the guy to propose, because he told Sarah, "You don't understand. There's something about you that makes me feel home. So therefore, if I'm home, why keep waiting to see if I'm going to find another? You are the home I've always been looking for." Those are the words, very poetic in nature. The man have found his home, and Sarah made his home her house. So together they formed the bond, creating a marriage, and she is happier than ever before. If you're sitting there on the fence wondering, what about you? One of the things that I learned in life, and it's not your fault, everything else we had to learn. We had to learn how to speak. So we went to school and learned how to pronounce letters and take letters into putting them together to form words. And we took words and create sentences. But all of these things we were taught how to do them. And then we were taught how to read, how to write, how to count. And then we took that basic knowledge and enhanced it over and over and over. But yet, one thing no one have ever taught us is how to love, how to keep a relationship, how to live life. I was a victim of that. But I chose not to be victimized by something that, because nobody have taught me, nobody have shared with me, to let it be my demise. Instead, I said, no, I'm going to learn. Whatever it's going to cost me, I am going to learn. Majority of you do not have the guts to invest on yourself. You want things to come for free. I remember these words, and I'm going to share with you. The first day of my lesson of microeconomy, I don't remember the name of the professor who was teaching the class. He said, there is no free meal. He said, if anything you don't understand about this class, but you walk out here and wonder what is, I want you to remember this word. There is no free meal. Everything there is cost associated with it. The question is, are you willing to pay the price for that? Even when you do something that is hurtful to you, there is a cost. The cost is the pain that you will endure. So for you to choose not to intentionally invest on yourself as it relates to relational techniques, relational grow-ups, or anything else, you are actually hurting yourself. Opportunity cost, they call it. Because you are not transforming, you are depriving yourself through conforming on that which you have settled with. You have a choice. You want to be cheap in your joy, cheap in your health, cheap in everything else you could have gained? Stay with it. Cheap yourself out of it. Or you want to be like Sarah, who, after going through all these things, she decided to invest on herself. And not only that she decided to invest in herself, she invested herself in a program that gave her the results. She is more peaceful today, happier. She never knew that relationship could be such warmly and wonderful. She never dreamed that she can create a permanent home for somebody. She no longer feels as somebody who is not worthy to be kept. She takes great pride, and so is her man. He takes great pride to be in her company. And together they're enjoying and living life at its highest level. The question is, what about you? Remember, relationships is not DIY. It's not. It requires a particular guidance and information and tools that will enhance. Many people are living very good in their relationship, yes. But so as many people are struggling when it comes to relationship. And those who are making it, majority of them are survivor of it. They're surviving. They're not living in those relationships. They've learned to tolerate one another, to tolerate their difficultnesses. Yes, there are those who have learned to flourish because they have tools, they have knowledge that many of you do not have. And for that, I welcome you to partake on my program on the link below. When you have time, check it out. But otherwise, I offer these free tools consistently every week. Follow me, subscribe so that you can get more information as they come along. But the choice is yours to either keep it, meaning to conform to that which you're experiencing, or throw it away so you can transcend beyond it and start living life the way you should. Until then, I'll be back.